Uh, Give it a couple more minutes. I think we can get started. Let me share my screen. Welcome to the February TSC meeting. We have 3 items on the agenda. I'll start off with some really quick agenda items. Next, after that, we'll go to Deepak, who will be discussing how to improve the new issue interface in GitHub. And then after that, Jasmine and Benan will be doing a knowledge sharing about how Luxio runs its open source community. So for me, I wanted to talk about 2 things. The first is, kind of like talk about how to standardize future elections. So the last election, I think what happened is that we had a new Linux Foundation representative, and so various little details of the of the election was different from prior elections. And so when I told Linux Foundation about this, basically they said that it's up to us as the TSC to figure out how to standardize elections so that like they're not different between representatives. So I decided to kind of like kick off how we can kind of like make it so that these are consistent, so that there's no surprises. So I have 2 guidelines, and then for 2 sections. First is guidelines, and then just kind of like an outline of the process. This will be in the elections section of the TSC repo. So like as the TSC, we can make changes here so that future Linux Foundation representatives can basically just follow this recipe, things will be consistent. As a reminder, like we'll be having elections basically every 6 months, so it pays to just kind of like write this down, just because we also have kind of like new representatives approximately once a year. So just writing this down, I think, will be kind of like help these go smoother in the future. So on the guideline section, just a couple of things. The first is avoiding scheduling around major holidays. I don't put the major holidays just because in theory we're global. I think in practice we're mostly based in California in the East Coast in North America. But looking at kind of like the composition of the TSC, I think it'll be easy to understand, like we probably shouldn't schedule around the New Year's and Christmas time period, just because people tend to take time off around that time. like probably we shouldn't schedule time off around Thanksgiving, that sort of thing. And so like there's no hard and fast rule. It's basically just, using best judgment and probably not doing this, when people might not be around and disconnecting. And then the second one is we should announce it. This is just kind of like a best practice that we did before. We didn't do it in this last election. Just writing this down. We should just announce it on the README on the main Presto repo whenever we have an election. Just sort of like broadcasting this to everyone. Then for the process, first one is basically I put down the dates so that the dates are all very consistent. Whatever D is, like this is like when things start. The facilitator, this will be whoever's kind of like helping us out from the Linux Foundation or our product manager over there. Right now this is Michelle, but in the future it could be someone else. Basically on the date, whatever date happens to be, preferably not around a major holiday. We'll open a PR that announces the election. And probably an email will be sent that says that nominations are open. So we'll have 7 days basically to collect nominations. And 1 day after that, then the election will start. We'll take a week to process the election, and then the day after, winners will be announced. Last time we did on the GitHub issue. Going forward, I think just sending an email to operations@PrestoDB is, kind of like the way to go. You kind of like, just to kind of like keep things focused. So that's my recommendation. There was a lot of kind of like random ad hoc questions around, kind of like very specific parts of the TSC, which is useful, but it doesn't seem kind of like pertinent to the election. And one can just raise a GitHub issue if you have questions about that. So I think like keeping the nominations in operations@PrestoDB, letting the Linux Foundation kind of like collect those and then send them out is kind of like the way to go. We already have a self-nomination template, and I think that's fine. So like we can basically just fill out that template, send an email, and then kind of like be done with that. I added this here. So like if basically if there's someone who is not being self-nominated, being asked to submit their nomination, like what we want to do is allow that to happen, but give them, like we want to do two things at once. We don't want to make it so that if someone's on sick leave, for that exact week, that they have to like, open their phone in the hospital and, like send out an email, right? So like, basically, if there's circumstances that prevent someone who is submitting a nomination for someone else from, like the person who's, kind of like being nominated from doing it themselves, just document it, put it in the email, and then put a date, where they can actually eventually confirm the nomination. And if eventually they can't, then, like we won't allow that. But we kind of like want to err on the side of like allowing people to, to participate, even if like, for example, during this week, suddenly they're not available, right? So that's the intended goal with that. Right, and then like I think like what happened last time was the election was basically suddenly closed, and like two particular individuals were surprised that their nominations weren't valid, and so like I basically have an instruction for the facilitator to follow up with whatever is considered invalid before closing the election. So like we want to make sure that we're being sort of loud and clear on invalid nominations, that's not a surprise to anyone. We want to make sure that people aren't being excluded based off of a technicality. So this is kind of like an explicit instruction to Linux Foundation to just double check that. Number 4 is like something that I think like Linux Foundation, I'm hoping to, basically get more details on that Michelle, but essentially this will be, I think my understanding is that if there's more than 4 votes, we use OPA vote, just because that kind of like does the, stack ranking and, statistics on, kind of like around that, and it ensures that that's a fair process when you have 4 or more people. And then finally, the winners are announced, and the election is concluded. So, like this is kind of like what I, came up with independently, but I'm open for feedback on what is missing, what should not be in here. This is kind of like meant to be an open forum on how we think we could, run elections going forward, and make it as clear as possible so that we don't have a new process every time we get a new Linux Foundation representative. And, like it's just kind of like there's at least as little surprises as possible. So open up to anyone who has any comments.
I have a question.
Yep.
So in the last election, the people who voted were the people who were not up for election. Is that always true, or is that because the other terms had expired already?
That's always true. So basically the TSC votes, but what that means is that if your seat is kind of like up for, has been expired, then you can't vote. So that in practice, it just means that the TSC votes. The reason for that is,
sure,
like,
if the elections happen like ideally before the previous term expires. That's what
you could do it that way, but then like the people who are up for vote might just always vote for themselves.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. But I like the guidelines.
Any other feedback? Okay, so I don't want to dwell too much on this, but what I will do is I'll submit a PR. I'll add everyone on the TSC, but anyone can participate in this. This will be in the Presto TSC repository, and if anything comes to mind like later, just feel free to add a comment on this PR. I'll probably like close it for comments at about a week or 2, so we have time to kind of like influence this and add things that we think are missing, or remove things that we don't think that should be there.
I have a comment, Tim.
Yep.
I mean, it sounds completely reasonable, all these steps. I was just wondering if in the interests of transparency, we should continue using the GitHub issue for the self-nomination as opposed to email.
What does that give you? Or I guess like I don't understand what additional visibility you have.
It just allows you visibility into who has been nominated and what the timeline was.
Got it. So like with the GitHub issue, like the GitHub issue tells you, sort of like how long the process, like basically it'll announce the date and make this more visible. Is that kind of like the idea?
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, we could create a GitHub issue. I think it would be better for nominations to basically be collected through operations at PrestoDB. Just basically separating out like, questions are like meta questions around the process from the process of like, how do I submit my nomination? So like, I think like we can keep the GitHub issue and like we can add like a line here that adds that. But what I don't want to do is like kind of like have a public forum where people can publicly quibble about this or that. Like I don't, like my worries is that like it's better to keep those two things separate.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, but that's good feedback. Like we could add a line that says basically, like we can add it to the PrestoDB repo README, and then also, basically create a GitHub issue, like let's say in the TSC repository. I'll add that.
Or probably you could list all the nominations like 24 hours before.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we can just say, these are the nominations we received, and these are now invalid. Please fix them, and then this will go to vote next week or tomorrow, something like that.
That's a great idea too. So basically just ask LF at like, let's say, D+6, let's say. To, sort of like list out what's invalid, and then also, sort of like just list out what's been collected so far.
Valid nomination.
Yeah.
So that everybody knows like what's the status of the nomination, and if there's something missing or somebody dropped by accident and so on. So there'll be transparency there.
Yep. So great idea. Definitely can add that too.
Like you add those details, so if somebody was nominated, they can say this person was nominated by this person, and this is their sort of agenda for the nomination.
Yep. Cool. Any other comments or feedback? Okay, so I'll incorporate those suggestions, and then, like I said, I'll create a PR so we can all go over the PR. Everyone who's on the TSC will be on the PR. Then anyone is welcome to add changes to that PR as well. And then one really quick thing before we move to Deepak is I received a request to change the meeting time, and so like I realized this is 9 a.m. California time, and a lot of us are in California. Wanted to get some just quick informal feedback to see if like we'd be open it to making it like, let's say 10 or 11. I can send out a poll later, with like other potential times, but just wanted to hear from folks like, is the 9 a.m. time cumbersome, or like would we prefer a different time?
Timing is always a hard problem, especially with like China, and there's so many time zones. So
For sure.
yeah, so probably a vote would make sense, because probably the quorum would probably can give a reasonable time. But yeah,
I'm not in California, but I like the time because it doesn't tend to conflict with other meetings that I have on my schedule.
Yeah, I'm also on East Coast time, and this does work out really nicely for me, but I can empathize that some people really get started at work around 10 or later.
9 a.m. is fine for India too.
Yeah,
Like
time also.
if
Yeah,
we move
exactly.
to like 11 a.m., 12 a.m., so that will be too late for Indian folks. So yeah.
Okay. Who is that talking?
Pratyaksh.
This is Pratyaksh. Yeah.
Okay, so you're in India.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, it's sounding like 9 a.m. is actually kind of ideal, but what I'll do is I'll send out a meeting poll, and like people can comment there, and we can get it done that way. But it seems like 9 a.m. is kind of like a ideal time. Cool. Okay, so next up we'll move on to Deepak about improving the new GitHub new issue interface.
Sure. I'll share my screen. Yeah, I guess a couple of TSC meetings ago, there was a sort of decision to remove the discussions tab. Before that, can everybody see my screen of the Presto GitHub?
I can see it. Yep.
Yeah, so there was this decision to remove the discussions tab for a couple of reasons. I think one was there was not much activity or like responses from the community on that tab. And also it's hard to sort of manage two places, like one is issues and one is discussions. I think the consensus was to move the discussions to Slack. One challenge I feel with Slack is the lack of searchability. Like I wanted to search for some answer I gave in one of the discussions and I couldn't, and it's going to be really hard with Slack. So I've been looking at other projects, how they handle this. I think the best I've come across is what Arrow does. This is what we have in Presto today. It's just a simple field and a title and a box for when you open a new issue. But I think Arrow and even Velox today, they have a sort of a template to improve the category of the kind of issue or bug. So so here you can see, like, whenever you click on error issues, your new issue will basically open a couple of options, such as the bug report, is it an improvement or like a new feature, and then there's a usage question too. And then there is then security issues. Then you can sort of categorize the kind of issue that they're opening, and everything goes to issue. So even questions go to issue. Then when you start issue, it sort of adds a tag of type usage, and it sort of has a template on what is the kind of issue it is and what is the question and so on. So this is sort of the model I want to move towards. And you can see some more examples as well. So here the bug report for Arrow is straightforward, like it's just a description, but I like Velox's bug report template a little more. Like it has like the title, the bug description, the system information, relevant logs, and it makes sure like it's easy for users to reproduce if we enforce the people who file with all this information. So that is sort of the high level idea I have in sort of improving the Presto's issue. So Velox, for instance, has a different tab, but I again agree with having two tabs is not ideal because you have to switch to two new tabs, and it's not easy. But Arrow does everything in one issues, and it solves the problem. So that's my proposal. Like follow Arrow's flow of new issue, and then probably make the bug report somewhat verbose, like what Velox does. Any questions? Any concerns on this?
One question I have, part of the problem with the discussion was that people weren't following it as closely as Slack, like they weren't checking quite as regularly. And I wonder if issues we would have, even if people are sort of occasionally looking at the open issues, if it's not quite as active, if it'll take longer for people to get their questions answered.
Yeah, getting responses is sort of a different problem. I think we just have to make sure like all the I think the core teams like Meta, Ahana and Meta are like more active. So I guess we just have to probably we can take it offline. But my idea is like at least in Vertica when was there, they used to have different teams who would like rotate on answering these questions. Like 1 week, the optimizer team would answer like take duty and like answer these questions. Like just spend like 1 hour every day. Let that week and sort of respond to the question. So we could probably come up with some strategy to make sure their answers. But I think more than Slack, having here is much more easier in terms of searchability, and also I think from a community, having questions here is a lot more easier than on Slack. Yeah, there's the other thing which I want to talk, like how about like we have some sort of a roll call to at least address these issues. When it's again, it's just a matter of getting involved. Like in Velox, we don't have this problem because people are like more involved, and it's more active. And I guess it's just a matter of like getting people to answer these questions. Again, not everybody can answer, right? Like optimizer questions, only the optimizer folks can answer. So I guess just Meta and Ahana or whoever is interested, we can have some sort of schedule to answer these questions, or maybe ping people, or have maybe a white like a list of people who are experts in these domains, and maybe ping them and see if they can respond. I guess Rohan and that the community managers can sort of drive this on getting the answers. But I think the big problem was having two different locations for the questions, and having one issues with everything, I think is sort of a simpler solution.
Yeah, I think having a template is nice in general for making sure we get the right information for different kinds of questions and issues that are filed. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah, the involvement, like the response, getting them response is just like we have to be at it. Like we have to push our developers and like who are the experts in these different areas to sort of respond to them.
Yeah, and like perhaps what we could do is just sort of like integrate this with Slack. Like like if we file it based on the template, I'm guessing like you can have a tag that's added depending on which one you click.
I'm sure plugins too, like where you can automatically send a Slack message when somebody I've seen this in like, I think Min.io and other projects, like whenever you file a report here, it automatically gets a Slack message to as well. So we could automate some of those as well.
Yeah. And then like, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head that, like in order to do this, probably what we should do is start tracking how well we close them down and like start measuring it. And like if once we have that measurement, then we can kind of like start to, like we already have, we have kind of like a working group that's, like the charter's already been formed. We just kind of like need to get together and do it for community support, especially the technical community support.
Yep.
And so, like I think the measurement and then, basically having a group of people who have either the time or more likely buy-in from their company to spend time on this and help move the needle. Like that would be kind of like a really terrific first start. So then the question is like, how do we measure it? Like, how do we measure kind of like how well are we closing individual tags? And that's where I feel like the tooling is a little bit immature, and it might be because I'm not familiar with everything that's out there, but like there don't seem to be good off-the-shelf solutions. So actually, like we do have some, like some folks who are building out kind of like a GitHub stats collection so that we can kind of like query it. And I'm hoping like we have something like that available to us soon. Once we have that, then we can start, kind of like a start, like
Measuring.
Basically, yeah, exactly. We can get a metric like something like P90, time to close, something like that.
Yeah.
And
I think the measuring part is sort of an easier problem. I think the harder problem is getting folks involved and making sure we respond like in a reasonable timeline to these questions. I think that's the big people problem that we have to solve.
I think we can convince basically, it's like a chicken or egg, like, it's very difficult to show value if you can't give a measurement basically to, like I imagine most of us are kind of like not doing this on our free time, or we're doing this as, as part of our employment. What we need to do is bring, show to our employers like that, like this is the value that we're bringing. This is how we're kind of like, moving the needle on, like this important aspect of the project. And I feel like, yeah, like as you said, it's not hard. It's just we have to do it. Hopefully we'll have like kind of like this like consistent measurement. And then we can kind of like, perhaps what we can do is either revive that, sort of like community support working group, or just do something ad hoc where like a group of us just dedicate a little bit of time to this. But agreed. Yeah. I also, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's other use cases like, for example, Pratyaksh wanted to write how the hoodie code works. So this could be a good like place to like write those things to like how the actual Presto code, like the layer, like some more like not like exact. It's not a blog, but it's more like a code level. So this could be a good place to write that information and like write some notes as well. So
yeah.
Another
idea, I think this is a terrific idea. I guess this is kind of like what you're saying, but like maybe one of these boxes could be, features that we want help with.
Yeah.
Like none of us have, like there's so many ideas that we have out there. But like, we could have a dedicated box where, some new hire or, someone who's new to the project can add a first contribution.
Right, yeah.
Something along those lines.
We should have a label for that, and maybe you can have like a good, like I think good first use is probably good for newcomers, right? So something like that, like we should we can have filters, I guess, like views on top of this. I don't know what's a good way to have views on like all the like good first use issues and so on. But again, like, yeah, so for example, Arrow uses good first use, is good for good newcomers. So we can just, I guess, document in the main page saying newcomers just search for good first use tab, like the label, and then you'll be able to pick up easy ones that you can start with. So
yeah, I think this is a great idea. I think we don't need to put this up to vote. I think we can, sort of go ahead and do it. I'm not sure if you have permissions for that, but like we could maybe discuss on Slack, like.
Let's discuss on Slack. I don't think I have. I don't know if I have the permission, but we can figure that out offline.
So
Okay.
Deepak, we also have like a Presto DB like blog, right? So something what Pratyaksh wants to do, that is like appropriate for a blog post. So I think
I mean, usually
it might be overcrowding this if we put like blog posts in the issues.
not a blog, like it's just like some information how a particular piece of code works. Like usually
okay.
blogging code is not ideal because code keeps changing, right? So
But then I mean, wouldn't that be like a design doc you put in like the
it's not a
folder?
design doc. Like
Yeah.
there's like Pratyaksh wrote about Hoodie, and there's already a Hoodie blog on how it integrates with Presto here. But Pratyaksh is like more one level down where it's actually going into the code and some interface like actual classes and so on. So that's something which would probably not be ideal for a blog, but it'll be good like a question and answer type of a thing.
Okay.
Like how
that's
the
fair.
Hoodie code works. So yeah. Yeah, so precision, right? Okay, what are the what are the exact code level interfaces for Hoodie in connector, and we could like, or I could, they could just one of us ask a question.
Yeah, no, like because that it could be considered like a not a design doc, but a code level doc which you put in the folder itself, right? I mean, it might be overcrowding this, I feel, if we kind of put those items here too. I mean, that was the main point.
Yeah, if it's
Because we already have usage issues, we already have enhancement requests and bug reports. So like
it's
Maybe,
fine.
maybe
Like,
it's like a wiki.
categories, yeah.
Yeah, maybe kind of like these descriptions, because like we did have, like, for example, like how bucketed execution works. That's like a wiki page.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we need to do more of that.
Yeah, that's a good example. I did look at that at some point. That was very helpful.
yeah, exactly. It can be wiki page too. That's right. True. Yep. Yeah, I guess
like obviously we haven't been adding enough here, but like like that can always change. Like we can always add all sorts of things here.
Yeah, this probably needs a cleanup too. Maybe we can talk next time.
Yeah.
Wiki page is definitely a good option too. But yeah, at least now having everything under issues is sort of going to be easier for people to like get the notifications and also respond to it. That's the first step, and getting people involved is sort of the priority. When people just open other issues, they'll definitely see questions and they can see. I already see one question here, so that's sort of naturally evolving into that already.
And the only other comment, it's not like feedback, it's just more of like a comment, is eventually we'll want to loop in probably the outreach committee, since I know they're doing a really great job of measuring kind of like community interaction. It seems kind of like a middle ground between community interaction and developer, sort of like the developer community. So like we may want to make sure that the way that they're tracking that is kind of like consistent. We don't double count things.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Cool. Sounds great. Any other questions for Deepak? Okay. Next up, we have Bainan and Jasmine, who are going to be talking about, I think, actually some similar stuff.
Cool. Thank you. Should I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Hold on. This one. Okay, this one. Can you guys see it okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Short slides. It looks like what we're going to share is, especially Bainan's part, is quite relevant to what you guys are talking about. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jasmine. Actually, let me just have the video on so I don't look like a stranger. My name is Jasmine. So I run the open source community in Devrel and Alexio together. Bainan is the tech lead manager who I usually work with. So some part of the later part of the share is going to be quite relevant to what you guys were talking about. I figured per Tim's invitation, we're going to talk about sort of how we do developer engagement for the Alexio open source community. Hopefully can learn some lessons and help out with the Presto as well. Okay. So, wait, hold on. So the first page, this is where, we also do an annual recap. So I just pulled some, I put an annual recap. So basically in Luxio community, we do run open source community, but there is a company that also does the version, but our part, both and our and me are only on the open source side. So the year in review, we do a lot of development. So the first one highlights when Luxio and Presto were in production at Uber. That took a lot of collaborative effort from our team, Ben's team in particular, and then another Uber's team. And then we also did a few pretty significant release during the year, including the scalable fuse and including a paging store in November. And then one other thing that's on this timeline is last year there's IEEE Open Software Service Award. That was actually the first one that was ever held, and we were the winner. So this is not just one of those commercial award that you can just go in by endorsing anything. This actually takes a lot of more research power, I would say. More on the development side. And then we do, just like other communities, we do virtual meetups, we do in-person meetups. One of the other things that Luxio started doing last year after the COVID is we start going out again to do in-person meetups. So you see some in Singapore, you see in Israel, things like that. So that's what the timeline was saying. Of course, on the bottom left, we also show people by the numbers. So what we do, where you tell, like including the event, whether we're going in person or online, we actually did 143 talks just with our small team. Now that is between the DevOps team and then our engineering team, because we usually partner together to do that. And then we also achieved pretty much a milestone on our Slack channel for more than 10,000 people. And we also list a whole bunch of other, how many GitHubs, requests, and then the PR numbers, and how many countries we actually went in person to give presentations, et cetera, et cetera. For us, when we calculated how many audience, one of the way for our community to capture the awareness of, to see how many people actually come and attend your meetings, right? To attend your meetups. So we gathered about more than 80,000 people globally for all of those 140 talks that we've given. And then, of course, we also do engineering blocks, just like Presto DB. So on the right side, I list out some of the probably more relevant achievement for any community can look. One of the things, like I said, the local cache, we were able to increase the cache hit rate from 60%, sorry. And then the second one I already explained. And then for us, it was important, during COVID, it was important for us to continue that virtual meetup. I think Presto Foundation is right now doing that too. Ali actually has been, and asking, see if we have also some people that we can put in the Presto meetup. And I've been reaching out to our resources to see, because people who use Luxio, chances are they also use Presto. So I've been reaching out to our user to see if they have, a bandwidth to go on the Presto, monthly meetups as well. But to us, it was also important after the COVID basically wrapped up. It's important for us to go out in person as well. Okay, so that's what this page. So the contribution benefits. This is more about how you work together as a DevRel team, and then the sort of hands-on developer team like Venan's leading. Usually we divide them into two. When how does it benefit the community? How does it benefit R&D? Because it's not because we're borrowing developers' time. So it is important for us to sort of, like Tim, what you mentioned, like how do you tell your company that what I'm doing is actually important? How do you show the results? So usually this is what we would show to the company as well. From the community side, of course, retaining and growing a user base is quite important. The way we do it, which Vinay was explained, is the timely response, like what you're saying. You can't just put an issue there and it's like nobody responds. There's no liability on how long it could sit there before the next person gets to it. And the other thing is the awareness that I was talking about, that how it benefit a community. But what you see here, meetup, conference, blogs, tutorial, those usually is a collaborative effort between the community, one who probably does the operation, and then there's DevRel who probably does half, and there's also the engineer who goes and partners with them. On the R&D side, we do provide, rather than just fixing those bugs issues, we do provide a synthesized theme to the R&D team on a monthly basis. And then there is also a collaborative, code development between the OS team, and then just to check to make sure there's no code deficiency in production level. All right, so channels. This is more for each community. These are probably pretty standards on how you consider like distribution channels, right? Once you get things done, where do you go? Rather than distribution channel, there's like where the question coming to, and then where do you go out for an awareness. So the top 4 are more like, where do you go to address when you're a developer, when you're a DevRel? So GitHub, like where the tickets come, the Slack is where the questions come. WeChat, we also do have quite a few WeChat technical discussion groups. So that's also a channel that we address. And then Docs is where the developer visits. And then the bottom few are more like where you will go to distribute your information. So those are the bottom ones are distribution channels. Conferences, like I mentioned, so there are a lot of conferences we go through call for proposal process. Alexio has, the community has been quite active in participating in those. So other than just hosting your own meetups or going to other people's meetups, to me, conference is a more, one is it shows you the validity of the work you do, because it's not like anytime you want to go, you get to go. You have to go through a call for proposal process. And 2 is it does capture a more larger novice audience. Not necessarily everyone is already in the Alexio or Presto space in that case. And then the other ones are pretty typical. Okay, so is this page 5? On-call process. Dana, you want to start with that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you for Jasmine for sharing all of this. Yeah, I can start with the on-call process. So yeah, our engineer will handle the on-call, and we have a system. We are using this kind of a system to triage the issues into quite a few levels. The L1 and L2, which means the most easy questions or issues, maybe most of them we can just respond or reply immediately. Yeah, but some of them maybe like L3 or L4, maybe more difficult. Maybe you need to do some investigation. So we just control our response time based on the leveling. For the easy issues, we will resolve them for the less than 24 hours. But for the weekend, we won't promise this. And also for the more difficult issues like L3 or L4, that might be related with some major milestone or major enhancement with our R&D team. So we will update our R&D team with this kind of issues. Also for some difficult issues, we may forward to them to the corresponding engineers. We also guarantee the 100% response rate through the Slack, GitHub, WeChat, because we have on-call. On-call will just respond to these kind of things. Yeah, we set up on-call, and each engineer we may put him on the on-call rotation for 1 week. So for every week, we will have a weekly handoff meetings. So the previous on-call and the current on-call, they will do some knowledge transfer. They will hand off the ongoing issue to the next on-call. So based on this system, only one engineer. We only need one engineer team for each week, right? We won't put more than one engineer resource on the on-call process. So it's totally acceptable. Okay, next page. But we are not just doing that. We are not just make an on-call just like a machine. Maybe just respond to the issue. No, we encourage our on-call engineer to be more creative. Mostly they can do anything they like just to improve our community or improve our product. Also, just promote the ideas or the PRs from the engineers from community. So this is something just like we build a relationship between the Alexio engineer and the community engineer. So we can have the task just like below, but it's not just limited to this kind of thing. The on-call can answer the email list. They can also answer the Stack Overflow, whatever questions. Also, when they seeing some new issues, new questions, they can also update our document. And maybe I think last month we also prepared a video demo. I think it's very popular now. Most people they like videos. Also, for the on-call, we'll help the contributors from outside to create an issue, and they will also try to close the really old or started things, and maybe some issue from 1 year ago. No one want to touch it. We can just close it. Yeah, also address those issues that never got priority. Yeah, just like I said, some issue may be there for a while. it become meaningless, so we can just close it. Also, we have trying to build some automate GitHub Slack actions, and also we are trying to help the new contributor. We provide a guide to the new contributors to help them to start their contribution more smoothly. We also build the open source community paging system. We also build the metrics system to analyze the response time, the number of issues, and the number of issue closed, this kind of thing, to make our community more healthy. I think we have some screenshot here. Yes, so here's I think we have better template now, but anyway, this one is our metric system. You can see some key metrics, something like the response rate. It's 100%, and also I think that this is 84.9%. It's just because maybe some issue is just created by us. It's some internal issue ongoing or something. So but overall we have the 100% response rate to all the things opened from the external guys. And also some we counting the number of PRs, the number of PR merged, and also the open and close PR. We can use this kind of thing to measure the activity of our community. We can see that the number up and down, but we can also see a good trend of our the activity of our community. Okay, next page.
Tim has a question. Do you want to save until the end?
I just had a very quick question, which is what tool is this?
Oh, so these are two things. So the top ones we just created from GitHub, and then the bottom two are called Common Room. I actually just went to Common Room and had an in-person meetup. So it's actually pretty useful. I think I think Richo from Ahana, she was also using this to check like sort of response time.
Yeah, we use Common Room as well.
Yeah. The only thing is that you notice the GitHub one, it doesn't filter out, like Beinan said, it doesn't filter our internal, GitHub contribution. So that's why it doesn't say 100%, but you can click into it. So usually I will click in to see, oh, this is our own default, then it met 100%, then we tell Beinan. Yeah.
Hey guys, this is Allie. I'm just sitting here with Vivek. This is really great to see, Jasmine. It looks like a lot of the stuff that we talked about in our outreach meeting, you guys have implemented. So has it been going well for the last since you've done it? Oh, that's great to see. Awesome. And then like all of the how you're managing the community in terms of responsive rate and measuring all of that, like the L1, L2, L3, was that just you just implemented that kind of as well?
Yeah, we did a probably more detailed leveling based on how Alexia, Beinan's team suggested, like this is how we should dissect it, this is the level that we would address, because overall we're borrowing, this effort is always using one engineering time from his team. So like he's the one who's probably lending me the resources on doing that. Yeah.
Well, it's great to see Alexia taking all of the stuff that we've been that we've learned about. I mean, that we have a ton of learnings, as I think everybody on the call knows from doing it with the Presto community. So it's good to see other communities adopting it and putting it into effect as well. I think it'll all help the Presto community. As we see other communities leveraging these types of tools and how we should all share learnings and make sure that we all know that we're doing best practices across everything. So really great. Awesome to see.
Cool.
Thank you, Ali.
Yes, the last page. Yeah.
The last page is some screenshot. We can see the activity we are doing in the GitHub, the Slack, the WeChat, and also quite a few meetups. Yeah, I think that the on-call process really help us, not just for our community, but also help us to reach out to collaborate with other engineers and communities. We do see these benefits from the on-call process. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's all this slide.
So then one specific question I had is when you use Common Room, do you filter on like the specific tag? So for example, do you go into the level of like, there's a bug issue that's been opened, what's the median time, let's say, or do you look at that level, or is it?
No, so the metrics you see here are actually 3 different ones. So like, so the top line, where is the week of, that I don't use Common Room for that. So for me, I don't think because we use the free version of Common Room. So I did not see how much details you can go. So the top line where you see the week of the number of issues, old issues, I just do a GitHub query to get those on a weekly basis. It's actually fairly quick anyway. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then like to actually do the GitHub query, how do you do that? Like, is there like a kind of like the GitHub Insights, or is it or like where do you actually?
No, I literally manually do the created old issues actually. Like, you know, if we want to search a specific period of time, I just manually do APR, you know, created from this period to that period. That's pretty much it. And then for the old one, there is another software that I referenced, didn't put on this. There is another company that they made an open source tool called OSS Insight. Now, however, I do need to warn you that that is not accurate data. So when I click into it, it looks like their dashboard is really good. So I clicked into it and then I checked. Some of them are accurate, some of them are not accurate. So I initially I referenced some of their data for like really old PRs, but then I realized it's not exactly accurate. But you can use it as a reference. It's called OSS Insight.
Is that LFX Insights?
Let me see if I can. Let me type it
because
here.
Linux Foundation provides actually some tooling. It's kind of similar, but you know, there is known data quality issues associated with that tool.
Oh, I see.
So it might be the same tool, but essentially like it doesn't do a good job of like correctly
it
attributing who comes from where, and so like that's kind of like the most important part for most people.
Yeah, I manually do the search for the top row. You see like where we want to see accuracy. It's not, usually we just tone it down to a time zone because we know when the code base started. Also, we keep track of how many old issues are already cleared. So for us, then you just do a math and it gets there. Yeah. Any other question?
And then the on-call, does the on-call like, do they handle like user questions or also code response rate? So like suppose someone creates a pull request, do they review the pull request, or do they just answer questions, or do you split those two things?
I think mostly they will handle both, but the thing is, some of the question may be quite difficult just for one on-call engineer, so they might forward the question to the other engineer with this kind of expertise. And also for the PR, the same thing. The on-call, for some easy PR, maybe one line code change PR, maybe you can just the on-call can just review it and merge it. But for some maybe large PRs, they may forward a reviewer for this PR.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
Hey folks, this is Ali again. So I just want to, I'll just add here, Tim. I don't know if we want to, if it's important for that we start as the outreach committee, start reporting out on, you know, our metrics and the process through which we go. I'm happy to do that if you think it's, you know, useful for the TSC. I'm not sure. I guess this was just Alexio presenting on how they run their community, and that's cool. But I'm happy to share more about, you know, the Presto community and how we're doing these sorts of things if we think it's going to be helpful for the TSC meeting as well.
I think so.
Okay, let's go ahead and let's do that then going forward. And you know, this is our process that we have this on-call process. We have common rooms. So I'm happy to report out on all of this monthly. I think it's good for the TSC members to hear what's going on from the community perspective as well. So let's do that.
Yeah, and I think one you know sort of gap is like basically I think PR turnaround rate. And like you know like where we manage that, you know like we do have the community support. I think we just need basically a small handful of people who kind of like have buy-in from their own companies, you know, who can kind of like, you know, pitch in some time to help out with that. And maybe like initially we start with common room metrics, but
sure,
you know, like from what I've looked at with common room, it's just, it doesn't seem to be at the level of granularity that I think like kind of like provides the most ROI, but I'm not sure if that's just me that has that opinion, but that's the impression that I got from looking at common room. So
sure,
that's
yeah, let's go. I think it's good to go through it as a TSC team. So let's do that.
Cool. So yeah, as I mentioned, like there's basically kind of like a working group that's kind of like ready to go. And so, like, I'll start to, sort of like, circulate this idea on like who can kind of like dedicate time, to kind of like, basically addressing open source PRs, open source issues. And I think like probably we'll have to like work together on, especially with Deepak's, idea on, kind of like adding this, sort of like issue template, like how do we measure that? And it sounds like common room is like a great way to measure that. So we'll probably, like want to, start to report on that from common room.
Yeah, so for your issue template, we actually have, I did not include it in, we actually have like the questionnaire template for the Slack, but you can't force people to raise question the exact way you want to. We just have a recommended, like if you type help me, you can always build a bot inside Slack actually. So the help me one, if you guys want to implement that. And then there is a lot of like tooling you can do, like linking between Slack and GitHub. But the Autobots push too many things, so we kind of disabled that. That's what happens. Yeah. Any other questions?
We have 1 minute.
I hope this was helpful.
Yeah, I think all the talks today were really helpful. So thanks everyone for participating.
We're out of time, but I guess Dennis wanted to talk about the Helm charts for Presto, but probably next meeting then, because you have 1 minute.
Feel free to just create the agenda for next month. It'll be the first Tuesday whenever that is, and we can get it on there. Sounds great, guys. Thank you.
Everyone, have a good week.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.